between the ages of 25 and 29. It's 1 in 331. So that's like really infrequent, right? You get into the early 40s, of 40 to 44, and now it's like 1 in 86. And then by the time you get to the early 50s, it's 1 in 35.
1 in 35. If you're a woman over 50, those are your odds of a new cancer diagnosis. In our early 50s, we're well into our careers, but often still a long way off from retiring. And it's not just cancer. Statistically, 1 in 4 people in their 50s and early 60s will have a physical or medical condition that limits their ability to work. We're talking chronic disease, mental health, injury. It happens more than we think. So how do we protect ourselves if we suddenly need to leave work? If you heard part 1 of this series, you already know that life insurance covers the people you love if you die. But the more likely and overlooked scenario is that you're living, but not working, and your bank account is suffering. And most people, even people with good jobs and solid benefits, are way more exposed than they realize. I'm Jackie McDougall, and this is the Grown-Ass Woman's Guide. Wallis Tsai, founder of AboveBoard Financial, is back to talk about disability insurance, what it actually does, where workplace coverage falls short, and how to make sure you're not caught off guard when it matters most. Okay, so let's get into it. What is disability insurance?
So with disability coverage, that really addresses the scenario where somebody is living but not able to work at full capacity. And that can come about in any number of ways. It could be something like a car accident that leaves somebody with a mental fog or inability to process information that prevents them from doing the job they had before. It could be a cancer diagnosis that sidelines somebody at least from working full time because, obviously every cancer journey is different and there's a range of experience. But for some people, they go to chemo and feel terrible for 2 or 3 days. But then after that, it almost feels normal. And in some ways, doing a bit of work can actually kind of feel like you're connecting to your normal self again, which feels nice psychologically too. And there are policies you can get that will pay you partial benefits if you can only work part-time due to your illness. With disability, you want to make sure that you're covering exactly the situation you mentioned where your finances get disrupted but you're still living, right? Because the life insurance only covers you in the event of death.
Can you walk me through how it actually works?
Yeah. So the way that disability insurance works is basically that if you're too sick or injured to do your job and your income suffers as a result, disability insurance steps in and pays you a benefit. And the idea is that you want to be able to smooth out your take-home pay whether you're healthy enough to work or not. And having good disability coverage can allow you to do that.
What does that mean, smooth out your take-home pay?
Yeah, so it means that if you weren't able to work full time, that money would still be hitting your bank account. It might no longer be from your paycheck, but it would be from the disability insurance carrier with whom you own the policy. And even for people who have workplace coverage, right? The standard workplace plan leaves a huge gap. And most people don't know that even if they have workplace coverage, the odds that their take-home pay, right? So the money that actually hits their bank account after taxes would go down by at least 40%. That's 40, if they were actually on disability leave and only relying on their workplace plan.
Wow.
And the reason for that is that typically if you say like, go to your workplace benefits portal and look at the plan, a common plan might say that 60% of your income is covered, or maybe 66.7% of your income is covered. And sometimes people look at that and they think, oh, okay, no, that's cool. Like, but also like I pay taxes. So, 67%, 60%, I'm probably covered. But what's really important is that most companies pay the premiums for that group plan themselves so that they get to take the tax deduction for themselves. But what that means for for you as the employee is that if you were actually getting those benefits under the plan, right? Let's just imagine that somebody is like diagnosed with cancer and they're not able to work while they're going through the surgery and the chemo, then that benefit would be taxable income to them as individuals. So then if you're starting with, wait, I'm getting 60% of my income, but then I personally still owe taxes on that, that's how you end up with a gap.
Okay.
And most people's lifestyle and retirement savings are not set up in a way where having their take home pay cut by, call it around 40% for any amount of time. And so that's why it's important to look at your workplace coverage. And the good news is that we do free reviews of workplace plans. So we can like take a look and just tell you what's up with your plan. And it's important to know though, because you want to know what to expect, right? Because if there's a gap, you want to have the opportunity to either fill it. If you're among the minority of people where that type of hit to your take home pay truly is not an event, like that's unpleasant, like at least you know, right? You kind of understand what to expect. But what is sort of best practice is to get an individual policy that fills that gap. And that's actually kind of the ideal situation because you don't need to buy as big of a policy as you would need if your employer covered nothing.
Right.
You still have something that's individual. It's not tied to your work. And what's really cool is that it often gives you the right to increase your coverage in the future if either your workplace situation changes or your workplace benefits change in a way where your workplace no longer covers you as much without having to prove you're still healthy. So that can be a really nice option in the future so that you're never in a situation where you're like, oh man, like I hate my job, but I can't move or I can only go to other big companies with similar benefits because you can't qualify for anything yourself, right? So locking in something sooner than later gives you more freedom in life. And it also
Okay.
means that if you had to go on disability leave, you wouldn't take a big cut in your take home pay.
And unlike the plan you got at work where you had to pay the taxes.
So actually good news, it is not taxable because the idea is that you as an individual are paying your premiums with your hard-earned after-tax dollars. Usually the employer is keeping the tax deduction for themselves, and therefore, if you get the benefit, it's taxable. Whereas if you individually have your own policy that you're paying for with your after-tax money,
Right.
then those benefits are not taxable. So if you ever need them, they're yours free and clear.
So if I'm getting benefits for $5,000 a month, I'm not being taxed on that $5,000 a month because the premium I'm paying is after tax.
That's right. As long as you're paying those premiums with your own after-tax money, which most people are, right? To not do it that way, you'd probably have to have like a business entity and you're running it through the business entity and taking a tax deduction on the business taxes. Most people, when they buy an individual policy, they own it themselves. They pay for it with their own money. That's after-tax money by definition. Therefore, no taxes are due when you're on benefits.
And this is where the conversation gets interesting about cost, because there are ways to get meaningful coverage without breaking the bank.
So my big budget money-saving tip for disability insurance is that there are many different levels of protection. And if something that would cover you if you were in a catastrophic car accident tomorrow that didn't kill you, but meant that you couldn't work for the rest of your career, there's one type of plan you could buy that would cover you until a chosen retirement age. The choices are usually age 65, 67, or 70. Obviously, if it were the same price as a shorter benefit period, you'd be like, yeah, I'll cover my whole career. That sounds great, right?
Right.
But unfortunately, like in reality, the full career plans are more than the shorter benefit plans. But in practice, the average disability leave is about 3 years, a little bit less than 3 years. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like if you think about a friend or a loved one who had a cancer journey that involved recovery and going back to work, right? Oftentimes it was kind of in that, handful of years range. And there are plans that are 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. And so you can pick something that at least gives you some runway. Like if the full career plan is not financially available or feasible, you'll be so much better off having at least 2 years to figure out like what's going on and how you're going to need to make adjustments if you're not able to return to work after 2 years. Just avoiding that immediate shock of like, oh geez, like I need to get surgery and start treatment, and man, like my bank account's suffering too. That's a horrible confluence of circumstances to be dealing with all at the same time. Even if a full career plan is not available from a budget perspective, you can still give yourself some real runway, just because, even dealing with a serious diagnosis, a year or two in, you often have a much better sense of what your options are and what next plans you need to be making.
But choose wisely, because the plan you pick is what you're locked into.
Unfortunately, once you're on claim, you cannot extend. So you are committing to only have the 2 years or the 5 years if you choose 5. If health sidelines you from work and you were taking benefits, your benefits would stop after that defined benefit period, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. And so you can kind of at least give yourself some space to say, okay, well, if I told myself that we would move to a cheaper cost of living area if I couldn't work for a long time, I have 2 years of having my normal budget to figure out what that next step looks like. So with life insurance, it's a little bit more of an art than a science as to how much you should get. And the carriers are a little more flexible too. Whereas with disability carriers, there is basically no flexibility. They want to see you actively at work. They want to see your most recent pay stub. They might want to see your tax returns. It's very much a function of what are you doing right now and what have you made lately? They're laser focused on the actual numbers.
Right.
As long as you haven't quit or given notice, you're good to go. The fact that you've had the thought in your head of like, oh man, I'm not sure I love this. Like, do I really see myself here for another 15 years or not? Those are personal thoughts, right? It's just like we all have moments of frustration all the time, right? So it's really good to make sure that you lock in coverage when you're able to qualify for the best deal you could get. And sometimes I see people waiting until after they've already kind of taken that step. And they're like, oh, like I told my managing partner that I'm leaving next month. Like I'd like to get coverage now. And sadly, that is exactly the moment when it's no longer possible.
So if you're considering disability insurance, maybe keep your quitting plans quiet until you're set up. And if you're starting something new, good news. You might not have to wait too long to get coverage.
Once you have an offer letter in hand, you can generally get coverage.
Okay.
And interestingly, like if you're starting your own thing and it's aligned with the field where you've been a W-2 employee, there are some carriers, not all of them, but there are some who will still consider you as an applicant. Disability carriers are like the opposite of venture capitalists, right? Like if venture capitalists imagine what might be possible from like a growth, positive, optimistic perspective, disability carriers are focused on like how they could get hosed, what might go wrong, saying no, right? So if you sort of put on that disability insurance carrier hat, you can understand why most of them are not excited to underwrite aspirational entrepreneurs. But a handful of them have decided that if you're going into an adjacent area, but just your own, for yourself, that they'll offer you coverage. So taking that corporate attorney example, if she tells her managing partner she's leaving because she's like, I'm ready to be my own boss. Like I'm an amazing attorney and like, I don't need to report to these people. And she's going to go out and start her own law firm. There are some carriers that will be happy to receive her application. But if she's like, I am excited to go open a bakery, that's where you're not going to be able to get coverage, at least not until the bakery has a couple of years of operating history showing that it's profitable.
Quick sidebar from my business owners out there. If you legally minimize your taxable income, and a lot of us do, just know that disability benefits are calculated based on what you report. So it's worth talking to a financial advisor before you apply.
100%. That's a really astute observation. And that's absolutely something that we run into sometimes, where sometimes we have clients who are like, my tax advisor is a genius. And, I've taking
I've
off
made $5.
taxable income is super low. And unfortunately, you're exactly right that the flip side of that is that disability carriers are going to underwrite you based on your net. Right? And that's how they think about income that you earn for yourself. So it depends on how you've structured your compensation. If you're a business owner who has both a W-2 and like an owner's draw, then they'll look at the history of both. But if somebody's doing a business where, like, say they're a therapist in private practice and it's just them and they're not doing a W-2 of any sort, that's where you can get into situations where like the gross is a certain level, but then the net is almost surprisingly small. And the person's like, my tax advisor is amazing. This is so well done. But then for disability insurance, it can be disappointing because they're dealing with that net number, which might not feel like the benefit they would want to have.
Right. So if you claimed that you made $5 last year, your disability is to be making $5.
A little bit less. Like disability carriers live in fear
right.
that they might accidentally incentivize somebody to not work. And so they'll get you pretty close to what you would make from work, but probably like a little bit short. And because they're just afraid that they would incentivize someone to not work.
Wallis knows this stuff inside and out. But for her, it didn't start as a professional exercise. It was based on personal experience.
When I was in my late 30s, I hit a period of time where like 6 different friends were diagnosed with breast cancer. And it kind of made me sit up and take notice and be like, wow, this is really like a concerning thing that I kind of was floating along thinking, oh, this isn't like even a thing on my radar, right? And so one of the things I looked to is it's from the U.S. Cancer Statistics Working Group, but it looks at the diagnosis of cancer for the first time, like a new cancer diagnosis by age. And between the ages of, 25 and 29, right, which is kind of a typical window where people maybe have some work experience, but are still pretty young in the scheme of things. It's 1 in 331, right? So that's like really infrequent, right? And then you get into the early 40s, of 40 to 44, and now it's like 1 in 86. And then by the time you get to the early 50s, it's 1 in 35.
Wow.
And, in your early 50s, you're still usually intending to work for a pretty meaningful chunk of time to get your retirement savings to where you want them to be and just feel like you're on track for the future that you hope for. Honestly, for me, like every time I go in for any kind of preventive care, like I just feel better knowing that like I'm covered in a way that would be okay if, God forbid, the result came back the way I'm hoping it doesn't.
Right.
Right. And so I think that having that comfort is really helpful.
That's it for today. And I know this episode covered some heavy territory, from cancer odds to workplace gaps, the very real possibility that life throws something at you before you're ready. But none of this is meant to scare you. It's meant to prepare you, because a grown-ass woman doesn't wait for the wake-up call. She gets ahead of it. So here's your mission, if you choose to accept it. Go look at your workplace disability plan if you have one. Actually read it. Find out what percentage of your income is covered and whether that benefit is taxable. If you're a business owner, talk to someone before you apply for a policy. And if you want everything from this 3-part series in one place, life insurance, disability, and the upcoming long-term care, the Grown-Ass Woman's Guide Insurance Cheat Sheet breaks it all down. The link is in the show notes. Wallis and her team at AboveBoard Financial offer free workplace plan reviews. No catch. The link to that is also in the show notes. If this series got you thinking, please share it with a woman in her 40s or 50s who needs to hear it. This is exactly the kind of conversation we need to be having. I'm Jackie McDougall, and this is the Grown-Ass Woman's Guide. Until next time, remember, you are a grown-ass woman. Act accordingly.